Canadians rightly were focused on the big picture, the fact that the government's fiscal plan fudges the numbers and still contains the largest deficit in this nation's history outside of the COVID period. Taxpayers have spent more and gotten less in the last 10 years under these Liberals, and that is not changing under this Prime Minister. This Prime Minister is running a record-smashing $78 billion deficit and is still leaving Canadians less able to afford basic essentials. This is the big picture. But today, as Parliament begins debate on the Budget Implementation Act, I want to use this critical opportunity to expose the designs hidden deeper within the budget. And here I want to talk about jobs, about the dignity of work, the esteem we have for different kinds of workers, and the harm that this budget will do to critical sectors of our economy. Before I get into those details, I want to talk about a philosophy of work, because policy, intentionally or not, always must reflect some philosophy. Now, Speaker, I believe that all work done by human beings has a special kind of dignity. This is a consequence of a more foundational belief in the universal dignity of human persons. If we understand human beings as having inherent rights and inherent dignity, then we are led from there to the conclusion that the work done by human beings has a special kind of dignity as well, because it involves the commitment and effort of a human person. If a human person is giving a speech or fixing a car or performing a surgery or cleaning a bathroom, in each case, that person brings themselves into that activity, their creativity, their effort, their desire for excellence, and their humanity. Work has dignity, therefore, not because of the nature of the activity specifically, but because it is done by a human person and because it expresses the desire of that person to contribute and create a better world through their work. Therefore, everyone who works can and should take pride in the work they do, as long as they are bringing the fullness of themselves and their human dignity into the work they are doing, as the creator or co-creator of some new reality. Now, this is a clear, coherent, and necessary philosophy of work. And work, when done with pride and commitment, generates all kinds of personal benefits. Work is much more than a means to earn wages. It is the means by which so many people contribute to their communities, create new things, demonstrate their proficiency and creativity, build community, and support those they love. This philosophy of work is understood intuitively by many working people across this country and around the world. But sadly, many modern elites implicitly or explicitly reject this philosophy of work. Instead of valuing all human work, many of our elites have come to esteem different kinds of human work differently, based on self-interested class prejudice. The rampant existence of profession prejudice, prejudice that values different kinds of work differently and that treats people differently based on the jobs that they do, has been deeply harmful to our society and to our economy. Profession prejudice has led authority figures to steer young people towards university to get a good job, even if they are much better suited to and could make more money working in the trades. Authority figures often have an unconscious bias towards their own chosen path, thinking that the road to dignity and meaning necessarily involves following the path that they followed. Creating a more equal society does not mean sending everyone to university. It means recognizing the dignity of every person, regardless of the work they do. Profession prejudice has given us profound skill mismatches. It's given us people pursuing programs of study deemed to be more prestigious and more likely to signal their worth to elite society, but then those same people finding out afterwards that they cannot get a job in their field. Profession prejudice leads elites to make artificial distinctions between what they think are jobs of the future and what they think are jobs of the past, often denigrating physical work and work in resource development. Most often, these predictions about such things turn out to be way off the mark in terms of what's the future and what's the past, yet impressionable young people are often fooled into absorbing these predictions into their own career planning. The result of all this has been profound mismatches in our labor market. High unemployment coexisting with labor shortages, especially with labor shortages in areas where well-paying, secure jobs nonetheless lack the arbitrary social esteem dispensed inconsistently by elites and elite institutions. Speaker, Conservatives are committed to fighting profession prejudice, and we will defend a philosophy of work that emphasizes universal human dignity and the universal dignity of work done by human beings. To the young people watching, when you are picking a career, focus on what you like to do and on what the labor market is looking for, and ignore the bad advice of disdainful elites hawking their profession prejudice. Now, Mr. Speaker, this brings me back to the budget. At a time when many university graduates are already working outside their field of study because they were given bad advice about the needs of the labor market, and at a time when industry is desperate for workers with underappreciated but critical skills, such as in the trades. This budget doubles down on liberal profession prejudice and fails to make the transition to a coherent philosophy of work. Budget 2025 puts well over $1 billion into helping university research councils try to attract foreign researchers to move to Canadian universities from other countries. Meanwhile, the budget fails to reinstate the apprenticeship grant, a clear broken promise from the Liberal 2025 election platform. Liberals promised to support apprentices, but instead they have nothing for apprentices directly and nothing for polytechniques where the majority of apprentices are trained. Liberals pumped an enormous amount of money into attracting foreign researchers for universities at a time when many Canadian post-secondary graduates are unemployed or working outside their field. And they could find nothing for most apprentices despite skill shortages in critical areas in the trades. But it gets worse. Budget 2025 specifically targets career colleges. It attacks what they do and it withdraws support from students who attend them. Why would they choose now to attack career colleges? What kind of fit of elite snobbery can motivate a government to target attacks on career colleges at a time when many Canadians need the benefits of targeted vocational programs to get the skills that employers are looking for? But page 217 of the budget announces the intention of the government to make students attending private for-profit institutions ineligible for student grants, making studies at these institutions inaccessible to many low and middle income students. This cut is targeting students, particularly at institutions, but it is not job neutral in its implications. There are many specific kinds of jobs where training is generally not available at public institutions. If you want to get a history degree or a law degree or a women's studies degree, you've got a lot of public institutions to choose from. But there are many good jobs in areas where there is public and labor market demand, where it just so happens that the public institutions have not offered these programs, and therefore private for-profit institutions have filled the gap. This policy change, therefore, doesn't just affect institutions, but it makes it harder for young people from low and middle income backgrounds to pursue studies in certain areas, and it creates critical gaps in these sectors. This is the pernicious practical outworking of professional prejudice in policy. Now, let me give a few examples of where this professions affected by this change. Now, this week I met with representatives from the Beauty Council of Canada. They represent a wide variety of hardworking professionals who cut hair, do makeup, and generally help others look good. They've got a harder task in some cases than in others. I know how hard these folks work, Mr. Speaker. My barber actually follows me on social media, and when my hair gets too long, he messages me and tells me it's time to come in. He's a great guy. Now, these are proud professionals, and they benefit from being able to afford good training that often happens to come from private for-profit institutions. This budget makes it harder for people to access those professions. Now, say what you like about Justin Trudeau, but at least he would have known never to attack the beauty industry. Now, another profession attacked by Budget 2025 is traditional Chinese medicine practitioners. Because this budget proposes to cut student grants for private for-profit institutions, most students studying acupuncture and other forms of traditional Chinese medicine, and many students studying other kinds of health disciplines such as chiropractors or massage therapists would be cut off from financial support. Many people in and outside the Chinese community want to access various kinds of traditional Chinese medicine practitioners and should be able to do so. This is a good job, and it reflects the dignity of work and the breadth and beauty of Canadian multiculturalism. But Liberals are making a choice to propose a policy that would make it more difficult for young people to pursue studies in traditional Chinese medicine, especially given the duration of study required. Why are Liberals attacking Chinese medicine? Why are subsidies available for any university program, no matter how irrelevant they are to the labor market, while they're being withdrawn from in-demand vocational programs that happen to be offered at private institutions? Conservatives recommended the opposite approach. We recommended an alignment between the needs of our labor market and the level of student grants, recognizing the universal dignity of all work and the potential of student grants to help magnify market signals. But this is the more hidden agenda of the budget, an attack on vocational programs and on in-demand jobs by a government drowning in profession prejudice and elite snobbery. Mr. Speaker, I move that the motion be amended by deleting all the words after the word that and substituting the following. The House declined to give second reading to Bill C-15, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on November 4th, 2025. Since the budget fails to implement a budget so Canadians can have an affordable life, consider that every dollar the Liberal government spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians in the form of higher taxes and inflation. Bring down the deficit to the levels Liberals promised in their last fiscal update, which promised $42 billion last year. Scrap hidden taxes on food, including the industrial carbon tax on farmers, the food packaging tax that adds billions in costs, and the fuel standard tax that adds 17 cents per liter to diesel and gasoline for farmers, and the inflation tax by bringing down the cost of government instead of printing money to pay Liberal bills, and include a plan for an oil and gas pipeline that would strengthen our nation's economy and get our resources to market. Thank you.
Order. Mr. Jennis, seconded by Mr. Deltel, moves the following amendment. That the motion be amended by deleting all the words after the word that and substituting the following. The House declined to give second reading Bill C-15, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on November 4th, 2025, since the bill fails to A. Implement a budget so Canadians can have an affordable life. B. Consider that every dollar the Liberal government spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians in the form of higher taxes and inflation. C. Bring down the deficit to the level Liberals promised in their last fiscal update, which promised $42 billion last year. D. Scrap hidden taxes on food, including the industrial carbon tax on farmers, the food packaging tax that adds billions in costs, and the fuel standard tax that adds 17 cents per liter to diesel and gasoline for farmers. E. End the inflation tax by bringing down the cost of government instead of printing money to pay Liberal bills. And F. Include a plan for any oil and gas pipelines that would strengthen our nation's economy and get our resources to market. The amendment is in order. Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I'm encouraged in the sense that the Conservatives realized that they needed to move an amendment at this stage. Compare that to the budget where the leader of the official opposition forgot to move an amendment. So at least they got their timing right in the particular for this particular amendment, Mr. Speaker. But I disagree with the amendment. No surprise there, Mr. Speaker. But I wanted to approach my friend across the way because him and I had a wonderful experience in the University of Winnipeg. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, I think that we had agreed that maybe we'll have another one of these debates. We're looking at the Carleton University. I'm thinking January 12, January 13. This way the university's back at classes a week later type of thing. I'm hoping you'll follow through on this. The two of us can work together. But my question to the member is specific. Does he not believe, given the vote on the budget, that we should just continue to move ahead and see if we can get this bill passed into committee sooner as opposed to later?
Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised and disappointed by that question because after last week, I was sure I'd convinced him. I was sure I convinced him to see the light and to join us in defending everyday Canadians, standing up for fiscal responsibility and fighting back against pernicious profession prejudice that characterizes this budget. Look, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to try again to help this member see reason, and I look forward to the fight of the century happening every few months at different institutions across the country. I'm happy to take the member up on that. Look, I hope though that he and other members will think about the specific criticisms I've made in this budget and end their profession prejudice.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. I have a specific question about something that's not in the budget, and that's not in Bill C-15, therefore, which is the government's intention to do something about forced labor and child labor. In both previous budgets, the government stated that it was going to legislate on that issue. However, today, nothing has been said on that, even though the Prime Minister is trying to get closer to China. It's fascinating. The Bloc Québécois brought in Bill C-251 for reverse onus to be placed on importers to ensure that products were not produced through forced labor. And so I'd like to know whether the Conservatives are going to support that bill and whether, in fact, the government should just bring that in as government legislation.
Schwan.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I will certainly study the bill that was introduced by the Bloc Québécois on this matter. It's a new proposal, but I do agree that the government did not do what it takes to put an end to forced labor. At the same time, I have many objections to the fact that this government has done a 180 on the Chinese government. If this government, the fact that this government has stopped mentioning the matter of forced labor is possibly because the Prime Minister wants to have a closer relationship to the government of China, despite the human rights issues there.
Leamington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for an insightful speech. I appreciated his perspective as he identifies the mismatch between what C-15 and the implementation bill of this budget tries to do and the actual reality of the economy that we're facing right now. He's not alone. Would he comment on the fact that the PBO has also identified only a 7.5% likelihood that this government's going to hit its massive $78.3 billion deficit? Could that also be that he's identifying a mismatch between what is said in the budget and the probable outcomes of it?
Yeah, I'll member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan. A very brief response.
Well, thank you for that excellent question, and it gives me an opportunity to salute the important work that the Parliamentary Budget Officer is doing. He has illustrated how the government has been fudging the numbers, and sadly, when you fudge around, you're going to find out. There's going to be negative consequences from the fudging of numbers, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer is now being targeted by this government because of his work. We should be giving him the mandate and the independence to do the work he needs to do, exposing the abuses by this government.
Resuming debate. Prise de débat, l'honorable député de droite.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, with your permission and the permission of the House, I'll be